Hey guys, it's Roderick, and I'm here for another review of The White Lotus Season 2, Episode 2, Italian Dream. So this episode kind of went from here from our season premiere, and it kind of deflated a little bit. But that's to be expected because typically the season premiere is for you to get really excited and really invested in the characters. And then we do a lot of table setting with the second episode. And then as we do the third episode, we get into kind of like the rising conflicts or the rising stakes. So I wasn't too disappointed, but one of the things that really kind of like weighed this episode down was a lot of exposition. Now, exposition is when a character kind of gives backstory or explanations for what they're doing or what has happened previously to kind of give you context, right? So this episode was very exposition heavy. Now, typically what writers will do is they'll try to disguise their exposition in, very kind of really quirky ways so that it's not really this is what happened, this is what we're doing, whatever. And, in this episode, they kind of disguised it or used conflict as a reason to for the characters to kind of deliver the exposition, which for most part, it wasn't that transparent, but, considering how interesting these characters are, I think I would have appreciated if they kind of had figured out ways to show us and not tell us. And there are ways in which they could have kind of told us all the things they told us, because none of the things they told us was really surprising, right? Like there wasn't any jaw-dropping, revelations in this episode. Most of the things that were told to us, we already knew either from the previous season or just from kind of the clues or the foreshadowing that we had gotten from the previous episode. But one of the things that kind of made this episode really interesting was the use of foreshadowing versus red herrings, right? So exposition tells us what happened previously, right, in order to explain what a character's future actions are going to do. Foreshadowing gives us hints or clues as to what a future event is going to do. And a red herring is a false clue or false hint as what's happening. Now, because The White Lotus is really a murder mystery that's wrapped in a drama, kind of like a bacon covered date almost, right? Every detail is important, but you don't know which detail is actually foreshadowing something that's going to happen or whether it's a red herring. And we'll kind of get to a couple of those that happened in this episode that kind of really made the episode really exciting. So anyway, let's get to it. So it's dawn, Ethan wakes up, and of course, Ethan goes running, right? Now, I was kind of on the fence, like, is Ethan fine? Like, whatever. Would he kind of get like the side painting treatment on Tuesday at 3:00 p.m. type of thing? But of course, I kind of changed my mind. I was like, yeah, he would kind of get this, pull it to the side on Tuesday. But, we'll get to that moment in a second. So Ethan goes running. We get a very picturesque view of Sicily. And, one of the things about White Lotus that it really reminds me of the other HBO series, Big Little Lies. Like the cinematography in these HBO shows is just always really great. So you always kind of get a sense of where you are, where you're feeling, and, kind of like the whole breadth of it all. So I really like the kind of cutaways and the standalone shots of Sicily. It just looks really, really beautiful. So Tanya wakes up and Greg is staring off at the distance. And I'm like, Tanya, girl, you're in trouble, right? So, once again, this is a foreshadowing moment, right? This is so we find out that this is a foreshadowing moment. Greg is kind of staring off in the distance, and then later they goes outside, and then Porsha sees them, and then, Porsha's all like hiding, and I told you I was going to give this like 1.5 episodes of Porsha being all shook about seeing Tanya around the resort around Sicily, because this situation really could have been resolved with Porsha really trying to take charge of her own destiny, of her own life. And I think, once again, being 20 years older probably than Porsha, I just have a little tolerance for people who are in shitty situations and they want to complain about it, right? So here she is, she's hiding. So then she goes off, and then she's just like, goes off and sits with Albie, and everyone's getting up for breakfast, right? So we kind of like get the breakfast scene. And so she sits with Albie, Nono comes down, Dom comes down, and Dom is like, oh, I wish Abby was here. And then Nono's like, well, why isn't Abby here? And Dom is really trying to keep his whole situation with his wife under wraps, I think, from his father, and also under wraps from Porsha, who he doesn't know, and he doesn't want to be telling all his business to anyway. So Donna's like, I told you. And Donna's like, is she mad? He was like, Then we get to see that Nono's very in old school. He's like, you can't let her divorce you and this type of thing. So he takes a very traditional stance, which is, I guess, in that kind of stereotypical Sicilian old ways type of thing. But we're like, okay, no. Plus, he's old, and I don't really like old people that much because they do kind of shit like that, like say whatever they think they want to say just because they're old. And I curse out old people, so that's why I don't really fuck with a whole lot of old people, because they do kind of shitty things like Nono does during this episode, which would have caused me to have a whole ass scene at some point during this whole vacation. Then I would have been blamed for Bruno vacation because I done cursed out Nono. But anyway. So then we get to Cameron, and Cameron is screaming at the airlines because he can't find his baggage. And then Mrs. Sullivan, who we find out her name is Daphne, reveals that her and Cameron never fight, right? And then Harper, of course, who's just smug, is just kind of looking like, well, of course you don't, because you're vapid, rich aristocrat, so why would you fight? You have nothing to fight about because your life is pretty much empty and filled with nothing but meaningless things, right? So Harper starts on her smug bullshit very early in the morning, right? So they're like, oh, we're going to, so then she kind of decides, because she's now made it awkward for the umpteenth time amongst the three of them, right? So she's like, well, I'm going to take my plate back to the room. They're like, oh, we'll go with you. Mind you, Ethan has just gotten back to his room, and he gets naked for a little personal hand jerky time. And I was like, really? Like, you're on vacation. Like, of all the times for you not to be jerking yourself off is when you're on your wife in vacation in Sicily. Like, I mean, I'm all about self-pleasure and whatever, but I would have been like, let's get it on, or save your puss till till my ride's done or whatever. But we'll kind of get into why that's kind of not possible. So Ethan comes back for some jerky time, and then Tanya, so we cut to Tanya and Greg, and they're talking about what they want to have for their day, right? And Tanya wants to have a total Sicilian day. She wants to look like Monica Vitti, and she wants to have a cigarette, and then go on a Vespa ride, and eat linguine, eat pasta with big clams in it. And Greg's like, okay. And I was like, red flag. This motherfucker don't ever want to do anything you want to do. He's always argumentative. Red flag. Like, they always say the moment you know a relationship is over is when the person stops fighting, right? So Greg now ain't fighting with Tanya worth of shit, right? So I'm like, ooh, girl, you're in trouble. I'm literally waiting for what the other shoe is going to drop in this episode, right? So Porsha gets a sympathy invite to the Greek theater because pretty much she's been like, Albert probably told her, oh, she can't go back to her room. She has to hide from her boss. She don't know what to do. So, of course, Dom, like most parents, kind of like, okay, child, they can come with us. So Dom, gives, Porsha the sympathy invite for them to hang out with him for the day. I'd have been like, girl, you need to get you, a clue in the life. But anyway, I'm not going to let Porsha vex me for the whole rest of the season because I feel like she's going to be in the same type of, millennial Gen Z, where is me, whatever, I need to up my meds because that's the only way I can function through life type of bullshit, and I'm like, okay, whatever. Okay, so Harper walks in on Ethan jerking off, and he just kind of he was really quick about it too, it was beep beep, and he was in his underwear, closed the laptop, and she's like, what's up with the boner? And he was like, oh, okay, and he was like, I was like, girl, there's no what's up with the boner. It's your man has a boner. Hold on a second. With some mouthwash and let's get to it, right? There's not a whole lot of discussion that needs to go on, right? And then he comes in, he's like, well, I was about to jerk off, endorphins. And so this kind of brings up this discussion, right? Because I don't know, if that was me and my husband was jerking off on vacation, was here, I'd have been like, do what you got to do, but that dick needs to be ready at 7 o'clock p.m. or at 10 o'clock or whatever. I'm not going to hear no bullshit, okay? It's kind of like your parents do, when you decide to have sweets before your dinner, but your parents still make you eat the whole plate just to prove a point of you don't, or you go out to a restaurant. Your parents tell you, don't fill up on bread, right? They tell you that because you won't have an appetite for anything else when your meal comes. It's the same thing with masturbation. You don't masturbate before you want to have sex, or otherwise one of the two isn't going to work. So I'll just be like, don't fill up on bread. That would be my relationship line. Don't fill up on bread. Go do what you're about to do and get in the shower, right? But of course, Harper has to take the, oh my God, couldn't you have waited 15 minutes? I just got a croissant. And then it was just whatever, it just happened, Then Ethan reveals that Harper's not a morning person, right? And he likes to run, he likes to have morning sex, and Harper's not a morning sex person, which is the first time, I think, as we saw last episode, that Harper's really great at like dishing these harsh criticisms at people, but she doesn't really take it well when it's reflected back to her, right? So then, then she kind of gets to this whole, cognitive dissonance where she can't really navigate the gap between the person she is and the person that, she presents herself out in the world, right? So she gets all kind of sulky, whatever. So she does like most couples do. They start talking about their friends, right? So then she starts talking about Cameron and Daphne about how they don't fight. And then Ethan starts getting in the shower. And I was like, I didn't think Ethan was fine. But then, he is like, had his little body yaddy and then like had like the big bush kind of popping out. And I was like, I didn't really think Ethan was all that fine. But like, again, on a Tuesday at 3 o'clock, he can get it, right? So I was like, okay. Nice Ethan shower scene. And then Ethan is kind of like, well, this is what you do. You look for imperfections in people when you're threatened by them, right? And she's like, what? No, I don't. He's like, yeah, think of the cleaning lady. You're always, she's such a nice, sweet old cleaning lady to you, but you don't see any of the faults about her because you think you're better than her, right? So he's like, what is it about them that makes you so threatened, And we discussed this last episode. Harper is a classist, right? So she's a classist, but she's also this virtue signaling classist, right? Where the fact that she thinks she's morally better than the Sullivans because she participates in all the democratic processes and she's socially conscious. And, Cam and Daphne are just these like wasteful aristocrats or whatever, but she's secretly threatened because it seems as if the exposition we kind of get later on is that she didn't come from a family of having money, right? And people typically, so people who don't come from wealth typically have two reactions, right? Either aspirational, I want to be like them, or they become classist and really hating the upper classes, because of their wealth or what they didn't have, right? So Harper's just a classist, and she just hasn't stepped into that yet, which is one of the reasons why Cameron and Daphne kind of rubs it the wrong way. So then Harper, of course, instead of taking the criticism in, right, and saying, oh, maybe you're right, she's like, well, I was just trying to say what kind of great relationship we have because we don't fight. So we kind of get a lot of that episode when the characters kind of get a reversal or a mirror of their own behaviors, instead of them kind of taking that in and like absorbing that and processing that and making a pivot in behavior, we get them really kind of going the opposite way and trying to escalate that, which I think is part of human nature. And also I think a way to kind of like raise the stakes and create kind of like a little bit of absurdity kind of in the show with these kind of really, narcissistic, not self-aware characters, right? So anyway, meanwhile, Carmen, and so Harper's whole thing is that everybody compares themselves to other people, and I'm sure that they're doing the same thing about us, whatever. Meanwhile, Cameron and Daphne are shopping and not giving two fucks about Harper or Ethan. They're living their whole ass best life, doing an Italian, fashion show, cut along or whatever. So as they're in the store doing their little like try on dancy, child, the two hoes, Lucia and Mia, come walking by doing their best rendition of Pretty Woman, looking in the store, talking about, oh my God, I would just buy everything. Oh my God, it's so great. I was like, these fucking hoes, even though I like them because they add like a lot of texture and comedy to the show, I was like, these fucking hoes. So they're all looking at the show, and then Lucia lets it slip that she's like, oh, how was it? She's like, oh, he's fine. He's a little tense. I'm gonna be his girlfriend for the whole week. And Lucia can already taste the coins. Like she's already preparing and stretching for her Scrooge McDuck, jump in the gold vault of coins, all of Dom's money, because she's like, I'll be his girlfriend for the week. Oh girl, I'm gonna bring him to you to introduce him, la 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 la. So, now we get Mia, who's like not really a prostitute, but she's like a prostitute in training, or is she like a floating prostitute? Like I kind of fill in sometimes, so prostituting shit needs to happen. So, whatever, right? Like it's still all packaged in some hoe shit, right? It's just that Lucia is like a little bit more upfront about it and 10 toes down with it, as Mia wants to be a singer who kind of likes to do hoe ass shit, right? Anywho, Dom goes to Valentina. So anyway, so Dom and Nono and Albie are getting ready to leave, and Lucia and Mia are outside looking to catch a glimpse, because Lucia's like, this is my meal ticket, this is my, as Rox would say on Rox, this is my, or whatever. That's their coin. So she stands outside and Dom's like, oh my God, these bitches. So he like sends them up away to the Greek theater and they run by and Lucia brings me, it's like, oh, this is my friend Mia. And she's like, oh, hi. He's like, oh, so then we cut away to immediately the scene where Dom goes up to Valentina, who, by the way, that opens up the episode, getting everybody information, which, again, I just always love. And so she's like, hi. He's like, these are my friends, and I would like to add them as guests because they were, because they're going to come visit me a couple of nights a week or whatever. And Valentina's like, okay. And she's like, well, we can't really do that. He's like, well, can I just add them to my room? So then Valentina's like, well, you can't because, you can only add like 2 people to a room. The third people, we got to charge you. Then we charge you for the cot, that type of thing. And he's like, oh, okay. So she's like trying to make it difficult. And then he's like, well, why don't you add Lucia to my room and then Mia to my father's room? Valentina's like, is he gonna be fucking your dad? He's like, no, she's not gonna be sleeping with my dad. And he's like, they're just gonna come and then go. She's like, oh, they're gonna come and then they're gonna go. And I was like, girl, at this point, I'm just in it just for the shits and giggles because he's really trying to work these 2 whores onto his hotel bill. And I was just like, whatever. So then finally she was like, you know what? I'll do this. No problem. And then Dom goes over to Mia and Lucia and is like, okay, guys, don't make me regret this. Don't go crazy. And I was like, of course you're going to regret this. Because what did you just do? Give 2 poor-ass prostitutes in Sicily access to your entire hotel bill? What the fuck could go wrong? Of course you didn't. Like, this is some, like, ridiculous, thirsty, straight man, middle-aged crisis type of shit that I obviously know have a lot of friends who have gone through this. So I can't really say that this is out of the particular because, he's rich and, he wants to throw his money around and whatever. It's not like they're in Calcutta, like it's Sicily. But I was just like, of course you're going to regret this. Of course you are. So anyway, they're like, oh, la, 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 la. He's like, I can't really talk to you when I'm like with my family because they don't know. And they're like, okay. I was like, of course they're okay because they're going to spend up all your motherfucking money while you're running around with no working your motherfucking nerves. So anyway, predictability. So predictably, Cam and Daphne are talking about 5-star hotels, which is what Harper has been worried about, that they're just going to get sucked into this vortex of materialism and just superciliousness. And, Ethan and Harper revealed that, like, they went to Puerto Rico for their honeymoon as opposed to Venice, which is what Cam and Daphne were talking about. And they're like, oh, Puerto Rico, huh? And then Ethan's like, yeah, because, Harper's family's there. He's like, oh, that's right, you are half Puerto Rican. And he's like, yeah, we're just not really that materialistic or whatever. And then they kind of do like this kind of this kind of like very awkward, oh yeah, we should try Puerto Rico. Is that like a state or something? Like clearly they're just trying to be polite because Harper just makes it very difficult for her just to get along, to go along. Like, I would, instead of me worrying about my husband jerking off, I would have had a conversation with Harper about why you keep being so motherfucking difficult, right? Like, it's supposed to be a fun trip. Like, at this point, like, no one, that would have, like, she just does the most for no reason, and she just kind of gets off on being, like, very, like, petty and kind of morally superior or whatever like that, which is, like, whatever. Anyway, meanwhile, the whores done bought up all the stores. I mean, Lucia's coming out with bags on bags on bags on bags. Mia done got her a new ass outfit. I mean, they're leaving. The woman's chasing her down, talking about what can you sign? She's like, oh, put it in room 148. I was like, girl, like she done got her a whole ass makeover. And I was like, of course you did, right? Anyway, Valentina is freaking out because Tanya has rented a Vespa after she has told Tanya that she can't have the Vespa because of liability issues. And they're out there like trying to take a picture. So Valentina comes out and she's like, wants to take a picture. And Tanya's like, who do I look like? And she was like, oh, hold on. And then puts a cigarette in. And Valentina's like, Peppa Pig? Oh, I literally laughed out loud. She was like, no, Monica Vita. She's like, Monica Vitti. And she's like, yeah, she's dead. Like, okay, girl, if you say so, Monica Vitti, right? So Valentina takes the pictures or whatever, and then like they get to start to sputter away, on the Vespa, which I was like, girl, because now I'm like, oh my God, are they gonna go toppling over? Are they one of the bodies they found on the beach because they done toppled over somewhere because of Tanya trying to ride the Vespa with her Spanx on and shit? So anyway, Kim was like, let's get jet skis. And then Ethan's like, oh, I don't know, maybe. And he's like, that's right, you kind of need like coordination to do that. And Cameron's like, so then automatically Cameron then goes into saying, how do you like being rich? Which is kind of very gauche, like very like rude or whatever. And Ethan's like, well, nothing's really changed that much. You know, it's just nice to have money to help people like Harper's parents, which now gives us an inference that Harper doesn't come from money. And also Ethan's sister, which also leads me that they both people were not raised in wealth. And then that's the line where Harper says, we're not really materialistic. And then Daphne's like, oh my God, I get totally drunk and I start spending a whole bunch of money on sad charitable causes with like poor animals or poor children or whatever, kind of like equates it to like getting drunk and going Amazon shopping, right? And then Cameron's like, yeah, see, we're not all materialistic pigs, which then Harper gets in her feelings is like, well, I'm gonna go out, to the beach. So once again, you like really much inferred that they were materialistic pigs. When he calls you on it, then you decide that, oh, okay, you're gonna go swim instead of being 10 toes down. And yeah, I think you're kind of materialistic, right? Like, I don't know, that whole kind of like faux, like white people sparring thing where you say snarky things and the person ignores them and says a snarky thing back. Like, that's just, I don't really do that in real life. So I would have had a good heart-to-heart with Harper, like one good time about her attitude, and then I just would have been fucking with her for the whole vacation. Like, really. I just been like, you seem to have a problem. It's like, what is it about us that you seem to have a disconnect? Do you need more time? Is this just a bad time for the vacation? Like, I would have had that conversation with Harper by now. And if she had been like, oh, I don't know, it's not me, it's just you, then I just would have kept on going. And then if she had decided to act out again, I would have been fucking with her for the whole vacation, right? I would have told my husband, I don't fuck with her. We have brunch, but I'm done with Harper. Harper time is done, right? But anyway, there's like whatever. So Nono and them go to the Greek theater with Porsha with her sad sympathy invite, and they're there, and Nono accidentally calls Porsha Cara, which is his granddaughter, which is Dom's daughter. And he's like, no, that's Porsha. Like, that's right. He's like, where is Cara? Why isn't she here? And he's like, oh, she's not here. And again, it's like, why isn't your family here on this great family vacation? So then he goes into the story of Persephone, Hades, and Demeter. And I'm a huge Greek mythology fan or whatever. So the story, very much as you heard in the show, is the story. Is the story of how we got the seasons, right? So Demeter is the goddess of the harvest. Her daughter Persephone is kidnapped and raped by Hades in Sicily, and she is then taken down to the underworld. Now, Zeus says she can come back up if she has not eaten anything. She eats 6 pomegranate seeds. So therefore, she could stay with Demeter for 6 months, and then the other 6 months she has to reside in Hades. So for the 6 months in which Persephone is in Hades, the earth is dead and cold, which is our fall and winter. And for the other 6 months in which, she is there, she's up with her mother, we get summer and spring. So that's the myth of how summer and spring. Nono takes this very cheery kind of Greek mythology and turns into a rape kind of story of how, like, Persephone was raped, in Greece, and, Demeter forgave Hades, who is her brother, for raping his daughter. So if Demeter can forgive Hades, what is it that your wife and your daughter can't forgive you from doing? Now, I was like, interesting. Is this foreshadowing of something that's going to happen in Sicily, or is this another red herring, right? Needless to say, Nono says, well, I don't know, it can't be all that bad. Albie's kind of looking like, I don't know, Grandpa, it could be that bad. Because we get to the next scene in which Cameron and Harper are swimming, and Harper's swimming, and then Cameron jumps in the water and like kind of tugs her leg, and he kind of does this whole thing, and he has kind of the conversation I'm telling you I would have had with Harper, like, what's going on? You don't seem to like us. But Cameron takes it a little bit further and is like, you don't like us, and I want you to like us. I want you to like me, which is a very creepy kind of way. And he kind of wraps this kind of awkward apology, and that coming with the previous scene of the Demeter Hades story, like, oh, is that foreshadowing or is that the red herring? Which really makes it very interesting. And so again, Harper's going to probably tell Ethan, and Ethan's going to start feeling some sort of way about this, which is like very weird. So you kind of don't know again what is going to be the inciting incident that leads to our dead bodies, right? So that is the interesting thing about the show. So now, child, Tanya and Greg are on this Vespa about to die. You know, she's like holding on to him too tight. She's getting bugs in her face. I was like, Tanya, girl, just... And there's no way for him to kind of like pull over or stop because the roads are super windy. And I was just like, oh, girl, here we go, this Vespa thing. Child, then we get back to the whores who have just been spending up all Dom's money. Lucia is in a new ass bathing suit, sipping her Aperol spritz, with Mia sipping her, you know, her vodka tonic, a gin and tonic, in a new ass bikini. And then, you know, Mia side eyes the piano player, you know, whatever. And then I was just like, oh, here we go, this piano player situation. So Mia goes over to convince the piano player to let her sing this song, because she's a singer. He's like, okay, fine. So then he sings the song, and it's the best things in life are free, which she did an okay job, but I'm like, you're a whore talking about how you feel like you're literally pilfering this guy's money. So I guess the best things in life are fucking free. Like, I was like, that literally is the whore's theme song, right? Like, the best things in life are free. So anyway, Porsha and Albie go to dinner, and then they're sitting down, and here comes Greg and Tanya, right? And Porsha starts her bullshit like, oh my God, I need to hide, I need to have a drink. Girl, whatever. So anyway, back at the hotel, Daphne's freaking out again about the kids. She can't contact her mom. And then she asked Ethan and Harper if they want to have kids. And which again is like very intrusive, but I guess you're on a trip, whatever, you're getting to know each other. You know, they don't really package their rude and intrusive questions like correctly, right? And packaging is everything. So she's like, do you want to have kids? Like, oh yeah, we were thinking about it, but you know, thinking about everything going in the world, we decided not. You know, we were thinking it would be difficult, but we decided yes, but you know, we're kind of trying. So then Ethan lets out that they're trying, but not trying that hard, because Harper isn't really a morning sex kind of person, and he's always really tired at nighttime, so it's been kind of difficult, and Harper is pissed. She is pissed. Like that kind of piss your mom does when you tell your family business in front of like another guest or something like that. Like she's like that pissed. Like you telling all your family business. So Daphne, kind of like with some emotional intelligence, probably the most emotionally intelligent person of the group, was like, you know, it is kind of difficult, kind of, you know, to sync up. It is kind of difficult because I was having, you know, with the kids and everything, it just makes it worse. So then Cameron takes this opportunity to talk about, oh yes, you know, it almost killed me. And it, you know, Daphne, you know, reveals that Cameron doesn't really help with the kids that much, and that this last baby was very difficult. She had to have the emergency C-section, and Cameron is like, oh my God, I walk in the room, and her guts are there, and they're digging through the guts looking for the baby, and you know, whatever. And it's just kind of like this faux emotional moment. And you know, obviously Ethan and Harper feeling some sort of way because they're just not that expressive with their emotions in public, right? As we heard in episode 1, Harper thinks it's kind of performative. And I felt like that little scene with Cameron and Daphne was like very performative almost. So I was like, I'm not buying it. Like, I wasn't really buying it, right? So anyway, No is then having dinner with Dom, and he was just like out the blue. He's like, your mistake is you were sloppy. He's like, what are we talking about? He's like, you were sloppy. He was like, you know what? He's like, because he's like, men are going to do what men are going to do, okay? Representing No and his whole kind of old school ways. He's like, but if you're sloppy about it, you pretty much are rubbing, you know, your wife's nose in it. And then we get to dinner with No and Dom, and No is like, you were sloppy. Dom's like, what are we talking about? He's like, you were sloppy. He's like, men are going to do what men are going to do, but if you're not sloppy, you know, you're rubbing your nose and your face in it, which kind of tells you that Nono's very old school, very traditional, and then he's been fucking around too. And Dom says so. He's like, well, you weren't that really discreet with your affairs. He's like, they weren't really affairs. He's like, they're more like picadillos. He was like, all you have to do is like, get yourself together. He was like, it'll be fine, right? So Tanya and, so anyway, we get to Albie and Porsha, right? So Albie and Porsha are having dinner, and she's kind of sussing around. He was like, oh, what type of girls do you like? And Albie's kind of, you know, they're trying to kind of like see if they're kind of compatible in this kind of like new age 20-ish something type of way, right? And, you know, so then we get more of this exposition where Albie lets it out that Dom has cheated on his mother several times, and his last time Dom got caught. And I guess this was the straw that broke the camel's back, right? And Albie says he just doesn't want to be like his father. you know? So again, like very heavy with the exposition, but it does kind of add some context and color to the characters and kind of like what they're going through. And then Porsha's like, well, I just want to have fun. I just want to live my life. I don't want to just be stuck doing all this stuff, and then she's like, well, what type of, women are you attracted to? And it's like, oh, I'm kind of attracted to pretty wounded birds. And I'm like, red flag, red flag, red flag. It totally reminds me of that Sex and the City episode with John Bon Jovi, where like Carrie and John Bon Jovi start hooking up. They meet each other in a therapist's office, and she can't seem to work out like why the relationship isn't working. They're having great sex, but it's not connecting until you get to the end of the episode. And it's like, she finally asks him, why are you in therapy? And he's like, every time I have sex with a woman, I'm mostly unavailable. And then Carrie's like, yeah, I picked the wrong guys, right? So these two clearly should not get together. But of course, we know they are going to get together and whatever, right? Then we get to Tanya and Greg. So Tanya's going on about how, Greg has made her Italian dream come true. It was a great day. She's eating her pasta with clams. And Greg is just sitting there. I was like, uh-oh, here it comes. And he's like, yeah, I have to go back to Denver tomorrow for 2 to 3 days. And she's like, what? You have to go back to Denver? And I was like, girl, really? For work? And he's like, yeah, I have to go back to work. And she's like, why don't you just fucking quit? Like, why do you fucking work this like land management bullshit, whatever, right? And he's like, I have to work because you made me sign a prenup, and if this doesn't work out, then I'm not gonna have any money, and what am I supposed to do? So at least we know that Tanya got a prenup, right? But then she's like, he's like, you change your mind every moment. He's like, if this doesn't work out, he's like, you cut off your friends, how many assistants have you gone through? And you really are very disposable of people. And I was like, okay, Greg's not feeling safe in this relationship. So he says, right? So instead of Tanya kind of taking that in, right? She's like, well, you really hate me, right? Now, when I watched this episode before the episode ended, I kind of was a little harsh on Tanya when I was like, girl, why don't you take that in? Why don't you kind of like, he's maybe telling you about himself. But now after we get to how the episode ends, I was like, I think you're full of shit, Greg. I think you're just an asshole, right? Which is really disappointing because you know what? Motherfuckers will chase you down just to disappoint you, right? When you think of like Tanya and Greg, like season 1 and all this shit, and we don't know how much time has elapsed between the first season and the second season, but I'm like, really, dude? Like, you're just whole ass garbage, right? Like why marry her? Why stay with her? Why have this romantic getaway, if you just was going to be like a trash ass man, right? So, I mean, Greg is officially garbage and whatever, right? So then Tanya's like, I think you hate me. Then she like angrily cries or whatever. She leaves and she looks at Porsha, and Portia's like, oh, great, here we go, right? Albie walks Porsha back to the room, and Porsha lets it loose that she done told all Tanya and Greg's business to Albie, even though she has an NDA. And now, like, she's totally freaking out. And she's like, oh, don't really say anything. And then proceeds to tell more of Tanya's business, okay? Which is, once again, this exposition about Tanya's father, how he was really rich, but, he's kind of pervy, very inappropriate. Again, giving us the backstory of kind of why Tanya is the way she is, wrapped in this very awkward, self-consumed 20-something-year-old's, word vomit to the guy that she kind of likes. And Albie has to kiss her. She kisses her. I'm not invested in this relationship because I think it's just fugazi. Like, I mean, she just should have fucked them then instead of like pretending like they're going to go out and they're going to do like this kind of like slow dating type of thing, right? Like, you should have fucked him then and found you some other Sicilian man. But anyway, she's the one who goes on vacation and fucks American men when she's in the whole ass Sicily. Whatever, Porsha, okay? Next door, Harper apologizes for being a shrew, right? Which is kind of like a fake apology because I think she wants Ethan to be like, oh, no, you're not a shrew. And he's like, well, you are who you are, right? But she's like, I really don't like the way that, Cameron kind of alpha dogs you. And he's like, he doesn't. And, this whole thing. But at least Harper is stepping into the fact of like recognizing how she's coming off to people, right? I don't think she's going to change her behavior, but at least she kind of recognizes that as well, right? Next door, Cameron's like, oh my God, Harper sucks. She's such a pill, which I kind of agree with them. Like, Harper has not made the best presentation, right? But they quickly move on to Harper. And then Daphne's like, she makes a very true statement that women kind of emasculate their men and then wonder why their men aren't as forceful, as decisive. And he's like, don't ever cut off my balls. She's like, I won't. And then all of a sudden they start having sex or whatever like that, which is what Harper and Ethan should be doing. Because Harper's like, hey, do you want to suck in my tits and I jerk you off? And he's like, I'm tired. Which is kind of the epitome of their relationship, right? He's not a night person. She's a night person. No one's having sex in this whole situation, and no one's willing to compromise because they're self-entitled, millennials who think they have all the answers to the world, right? Anyway, Lucia knocks on Dom's door after she done went and spent up all his money, regaling about how much a great time they had. And Dom is now kind of having this kind of, guilt trip because, Nono's like, get it together. And so he's like, oh, I really shouldn't. And he's like at the door with his shirt all open. And she's like, oh, no, I can't come in. Really? My friend wants to come in too. And I'm like, wait a minute. I thought Mia was a turning no tricks. Oh, right. So she really is a floater hoe, right? She kind of like, you have a floater. Like, she doesn't work. She doesn't do hoe shit all the time. She kind of fills in what hoe shit needs to be done, right? So so Lucia and Mia go in Dom's room, and then they're doing this sad little sexy dance that's supposed to like make Dom think that they're going to do a lesbian threesome or whatever. And I was like, I don't know. I just watch better porn, and I'm just like, is that supposed to be something? But I guess if you're 50-something with a midlife crisis, who supposedly now, Dom's like, I think I'm a sex addict. Really? That's your excuse? No, you're just an asshole, right? You're just a trash-ass man. Like, I hate when people use like, I'm just a sex addict. Nah, you're just a trash-ass motherfucker. Like, you're not a sex addict, right? Anyway, they're doing this sad-ass dance and they're drinking up Dom's liquor, okay? And all this shit. And then finally Dom's drinking and he's like, no, you shouldn't. And then finally Dom gets that look in his eye that every man at some point gives during the night when they had like just that much enough to drink, like somebody's about to get fucked. Either you and you and you and you, but Dom gives that look like y'all about to get fucked. So I was like, okay, maybe, they just spent up all your money. You might as well, get something out of it. Mind you, Nono's in the other room watching Godfather 2, hearing the sniggling and giggling. It was like, what? And I was like, no. I thought sure Nono was going to get up and put on his little Hugh Hefner bathrobe and start knocking on the door. And I just would have died right there, right? So then Lucia gets naked in the pool, and Dom gets in the pool, and Mia's in the pool, and the faux threesome, 1.5-some, whatever that ends up being, right? Like, probably ends up going to be like Dom ends up fucking Lucia, and then she does a little kissy, play with Dom's balls type of thing. And I was like, girl, get out of here with like all this fake, like whatever, right? And I was like, okay, but again, he's a sex addict. What can I say, right? So finally we get Tanya waking up in the middle of the night and Greg's not there. And I was like, oh my God, has Greg left already? He's got to call his flight. And I'm like, again, like, first of all, the suite, I guess, is so big that, half the problem is that Greg can go around wandering and getting lost in this huge suite. And so she gets up and she's looking for Greg and it's completely dark and he's outside on the terrace talking, right? And so she kind of gets close and he's like, yeah, she's clueless or whatever like that. She's clueless as usual. He says, I'll see you tomorrow. And I was like, oh my fucking God, you are officially a trash ass motherfucker. And Tanya has heard everything. So, the episode ends. So, it was really sad, just to see kind of like the whole thing with Tanya. And I was like, girl, I did want Tanya to have a win, right? Even though she did put my girl Belinda through it last season. But, whatever. So again, so this is a really good episode. Like I said, very exposition heavy. We got a lot of backstory. We got some foreshadowing or we got some red herrings. The red herring, sorry, I forgot the last red herring or foreshadowing is Nono was watching The Godfather 2. And the scene says, women in Sicily are more dangerous than shotguns. Right? So we don't really know if that's going to be like a foreshadowing moment or whether that's another red herring, right? So anyway, I forgot to mention that about the no-no thing. So once again, I thought it was a good episode. It kind of went up and down for me. The horrors are still like the best comic relief about this whole thing. But want to see like now the big stakes are going to be this next episode to kind of see how they're going to raise the stakes. They're going to show more layers of the character. We get more into the murder mystery and some of the conflict. Because last season, we just had such interesting characters and they just had such interesting reveals. And a lot of these characters are on the same notes as that. Like, we still kind of have this, you know, the classist struggle and then like the people with secrets and Tanya and her bullshit. So again, I want to see kind of something different, what new direction they're going to go with these characters, because they're such interesting characters. I hope they really get some very interesting mileage out of it. So anyway, thank you guys. Please like, please subscribe, please, you know, share this video with your friends, and I will see you all Tuesday for The Handmaid's Tale, and then next Sunday for The White Lotus. Thanks, guys. Bye.